BBC wants to add third parties to its Sounds app to balance Apple and Spotify dominance in podcasts. Earlier this week, the BBC aids podcasts from Google's podcast app and assistant platform after determining that it wasn't getting enough out of the relationship, specifically noting that Google wasn't providing it with enough audience data and search links to its own sites and services. Today, we get some more context and development on that decision. The UK media giant announced it is working on an expansion of its own. It's in talks with other media companies to add their podcasts and live radio streams to it, a move it hopes will help not just the BBC itself but other media owners find some more competitive leverage against not just Google, but also Apple and Spotify, with the latter two currently accounting for 80% of the podcast and music streaming markets in the UK. The plan to expand Sounds has had 1.7 million downloads since being launched just over 4 months ago, with third-party content producers was outlined today in The Broadcasters, where it details strategy for the year ahead. James Purnell, the former politician who is now the BBC's head of radio and education, dove a little deeper into the details in a choice and plurality are good, but dominance by. Purnell also made clear that this was not a grand move to building a walled garden of its own. We want to continue to make our content available to third-party platforms, he said. But we want to do so. He is, of course, referring here to the kerfuffle earlier this week when the BBC pulled its podcasts from Google platforms, after Google refused to link to other places apart from on Google where the content could be heard. We've asked Google to stop favoring their own app from search, but we're told this wasn't possible, and instead that the only option was to take our podcasts off their service. This is disappointing. The blog post published today by Purnell provides an interesting template and one more example of how the BBC has tried to double down over the years on building its own platforms and technology to determine its own digital destiny, rather than have it be too tied to third-party platforms it cannot control. As with other TV broadcasters and their own streaming platforms, one of the more notable examples of how the BBC has struck out on its own is its development of iPlayer, the online and OTT on-demand service for catching up on all the TV and radio programming that the BBC puts out on its linear channels. Sounds was built, but for all that, it is also still early days. The blog post does not detail what other content providers and producers are in conversations with the BBC, nor is there any mention of how the BBC would handle the commercial aspects of those relationships, considering that its own content within the UK is delivered as an ad-free, free public service. Internationally, Purnell also takes the opportunity at the mic, so to speak, to level a strike against the likes of Facebook and the false sense of security that many media companies fell into during the early days of using social networking sites to build audiences for their content online. Colleagues from other industries often tell me they wish they had put more emphasis on building up their distribution channels rather than relying on social media, he notes. Many of them are. Radio, he adds, isn't in that situation yet, since only a small proportion of listening happens online in the UK. But with Spotify, we should heed the lessons of other industries and change before we have to, Purnell notes.
Raindrop, truck top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park.